Hi, I'm Richard Costello, and thank you for tuning into episode number 8 of the Castler podcast. Today, I'm joined by Jake Bird, Director of JI Marketing, an AI consultancy that bridges the gap between AI innovation and strategic marketing. Jake, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Richard. Thank you for having me.
Great to have you on. So today, we're going to be talking about a range of topics, including how you ended up, Jake, starting your AI consultancy, the role that AI can play in B2B marketing, and what the future holds for AI-powered B2B marketing. So, Jake, you founded JI Marketing in February this year after working in B2B marketing for the best part of a decade. Could you tell us a bit about the journey you've been on to get to this point, why you ended up launching your AI consultancy, and how it's been going so far?
Yeah, so I've been very privileged over the course of my career that I've been at a couple of agencies, and I've worked across a wide range of tech customers across lots of industries. And where my real specialty was formed in is in account-based marketing. And when GPT first came out in 2022, when it was released to the public, I just got really obsessed with it pretty quickly. And I was testing it in my own time, just over weekends and evenings. And after a couple of weeks of testing it, I had a conversation with my directors, and I said, "This is going to be massive for ABM because, as we all know, ABM's resource intensive. It costs a lot of money, and I just saw AI as this big enabler for that. So I made the case to say, like, I'll move away from my sort of strategic role and I'll go into more of the technical role of AI and operations. And this was back in a time where clients were absolutely not really interested in using AI. I think most were testing it internally in some form, but they definitely didn't want an AI doing it. So I was just running sort of mock campaigns or alongside the campaigns that we were actually running at the business to see where does AI work best and what tools should we be using. And sadly, in January, that agency went insolvent. It's a real shame because I really enjoyed what we were doing there. It was a great business, great culture. We were going in a brilliant direction, but it was a tough year last year. So, but it opened up this wonderful opportunity for me to decide what I wanted to do in my next as my next move. And originally, I was just looking at jobs, and I just couldn't find anything that was, what the skill set that I've built over the last three years or so. And the support from the B2B just network was just unbelievable. The number of people who reached out to me who were saying, we saw your podcast when you were at Sea Blue, really liked what you were doing. Can we have a conversation with you? We'd love to hear what you're up to. And I just got so much love and encouragement. So it really gave me the boost that I needed to say, well, actually, if there aren't roles out there, maybe that's the opportunity to go and start something new. And so that's where the AI consultancy came from. It's me applying what I've learned about AI and the tech skills I have in AI with the domain expertise that I have in marketing, but more specifically account-based marketing, because that's where we're going to get most value from these AI tools, is where we can basically merge those two things together, because you know what good looks like, and therefore you can build the plan and you can build the systems and the processes that where AI can help you to get there.
Yeah, I think it's a super interesting story, and it reminds me of, I think, something that Rory Sutherland said about it's helpful in your career to have two like intersecting different specialisms because it makes you much more unique. So having B2B marketing, deep B2B marketing expertise combined with deep AI expertise and blending those together makes you sort of really like an interesting proposition as a sort of skilled person. And I think also that that point you mentioned about when you left your role, your last kind of employed role, that kind of sense of like the path like disappearing. Because there's this quote that I find it's a bit cringy maybe, but I don't know, I'll say it anyway. It's quite good. Where it says like you're on your true path when the path disappears. Ooh. I think that's something it says. So like
that's deep. That's deep.
Yeah. So and so which I think resonates if you're like going out on your own, like, because if you're in a career path, you can often be like, well, the next step would be this, the next step would be this, next step would be this, and kind of when if or often I think if you go out on your own, it's like, oh my goodness, what is next? It's like there's no sight of it. It could be this, it could be like pretty much anything. And so I think it's exciting, but also frightening at the same time, which I imagine you've probably been experiencing in probably quite equal measure over the last sort of 6 months or so. I don't know.
Well, I think the first month was somewhat scary when I first launched, but then I've developed some really good relationships. I've got some really good clients who really buy into what I'm doing, and they believe me, and so I've got some really awesome people that I'm working with, and things are going really well so far. No complaints.
Yeah, no, it's great. So diving into kind of the main topics then around the state of AI in B2B marketing. So first, let's talk about agentic AI. I know that you've mentioned to me that people can have unrealistic expectations of it for B2B marketing.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a bit about what you mean about that?
So I'll go into a bit about how AI agents actually work. So that was something I was really keen to do when I first came into this, was 3 years ago, and this is just who I am, is I need to understand how things work to get them. And so I was really deep diving into how this tech actually works and how it's actually built. And agents is more of a recent progression that was starting to crop up sort of towards the end of 2023. And you are right to say that I do see that there are some unrealistic expectations with them, and I see the term thrown out so much at the moment. And I don't know if it's just a semantics thing, or if people or if people are just misinformed on how agents actually work. Because I've seen at Ignite, so many businesses are talking about agents, and in the context of B2B, that just doesn't really make sense to me. And I'll tell you exactly why. So how AI agents work is that they are programmed to be autonomous. So they figure out steps to achieve goals without constant monitoring from people. They have continuous learning, so they improve over time using the data from their past experiences. They have memory systems, tools, integrations, and then they can collaborate sometimes with other agents as well. So all of these systems, they have their own short-term, long-term memory, access to RAG databases so that they can pull, search and retrieve the relevant information at the right time, and they'll have a list of tools. What we then, as the people, need to do is tell the agent what are the inputs, and then here's all the bits in the middle that I just mentioned, and then what are the outputs from that. And so what that means is they're really good for repetitive and I would say manual workflows. They do work in some areas. So from a marketing point of view, they're good for lead qualification, because you can get a load of account insights out from a sales rep, or you can get some account insights, that you can search for manually, or that you buy from a third party source, because you've then listed out and you've quantified what does that model look like. And it's quite a transactional thing there, where you give it all that information, and then it gives you an output, and you can either say if that's right or wrong. That will then learn as it goes along from the parameters that you've set what good looks like. It works as well for campaign reporting, content tagging, data analysis, and for customer service like chatbots and customer support agents. And why they struggle then in more, I would say, B2B context and in ABM specifically, is because they have creative and strategic limitations. These are predictive models at the end of the day. They're powered by LLMs, and those have been built as creative, as predictive models essentially. And we can come back to that later. And it still needs that human touch requirement. And you can't train an agent on how to give that human touch. You can't train an agent on authenticity and how to build relationships. And also, I talked about data a lot. The data is so important in this. And when it comes to B2B marketing data, there are severe data limitations, incomplete customer data, rapidly changing, organizational structures. It sounds easy to say, well, we'll just keep an eye on everyone at Barclays who's in the decision-making unit. And then if anyone moves, we'll just update that in the system. But that is possible to do. But the reality of doing it is so unbelievably expensive, because you have to set these almost daily, maybe even weekly triggers off, and you need to set that up as an automated system, as a automated workflow anyway, and it costs huge amounts of money. LinkedIn is a real pain when it comes to scraping data. So every time you scrape a page of data, that can cost you £2, £3, £4 or something. If you're doing that for 500 businesses, that's just not a sustainable way of doing it. So there are some tools that you can employ that can do this sort of thing for you, but when you're dealing with this kind of personal data, you kind of want to be able to do it yourself, or not at all, because it's PII in many cases. You also, like on the PII side, you don't want to feed confidential information into AI systems at the best of times, and from the data limitation point of view, it's just complex, unstructured data about customer relationships. So it's very hard to actually build an AI agent in the B2B world that can create, good content or ABM workflows for you, because it's so unpredictable. Every account's different. Every proposition, if you're doing ABM problem, there's slight nuance to it. And so, AI just can't capture strategic nuance. It has a lack of deep contextual understanding. So when I hear these businesses say that they've built an agent that's going to, create content, I'm immediately like, have you? Because that's, you're either it's a semantics thing at the end of the day. You've either created an automated workflow, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And that, that can be really powerful in many instances. But if you have actually built an agent to do this stuff, it concerns me that you're just going to be churning out generic content.
Yeah. And is an agent effectively like a concept, or is it more of because this is what I sort of slightly struggle with, is I, like probably everybody, use predominantly ChatGPT, but also some of the other ones. And is it possible to use ChatGPT? So when you, for instance, do the deep research thing on ChatGPT and it goes off on the internet and searches for things on your behalf, is that agentic AI? Is that where you would say, like, because it's sort of doing something, it's kind of, or is that still in the realms of the step below, which I think is that still called kind of chatbot AI? Is that a fair summary of the distinction, where you've got the kind of pre-agentic AI, which is like chat interface predominantly, and then and you're sort of like, it's helping you, but you're needing to kind of ask it constantly to do, you're sort of asking, it's like an assistant. Maybe that's a better way, assistants versus agents. But then agents is more like doing it. But yeah, what's your kind of, where do you draw the line? How can people understand where something becomes agentic AI?
Sure. Yeah. So when you are speaking to ChatGPT, you're speaking, 4.0, that's a model that you're speaking to. You're speaking to an LLM at the end, which has access to different tools that it can then speak to. So when you ask it and you say, summarize, can you give me some indication of, what's the revenue at HSBC in 2024? That will then go into the tool, which is the search capability. And then that basically looks through Google, and then it scrapes what's in there, and then it goes through all of that, and then it plucks that out as an answer to you. The agentic thing comes in there more in, I would say, O1, because what the agentic ability of it is, it's able to atomize and kind of understand a little bit more about the question that you've asked it. So then it can then define its own workflow of what it needs to do to get to that answer. So in the 4.0 example, it will just scrape information. It will then, analyze it and then give you the answer that you're looking for. Whereas in the 4.0 example, that's more for more detailed workflows than maybe just looking up revenue. But just as an example, it might say, okay, well, I understand that you're looking at revenue. I also know now that I want to go and look at these websites. This is the Google search that I'm going to be looking for. And then this is the information I'm looking for. Therefore, I'm then going to summarize this as an answer, which I'm going to send through to the user. So the agentic bit is like when it starts stepping out, what are the steps that it needs to go through to get to the outcome that you're looking for. But if we look more at an example of an AI agent in practice, so there is a distinction between the software that is an LLM. So an LLM is the predictive model. Agents is a separate software where they have that they have the ability to kind of understand the environment that they're in. Like I said, they can make autonomous decisions on that. So a really good example of an AI agent in practice that works really well is a customer support ticket classifier. So because the input is the email gets sent through to the customer support ticket classifier. That's quite predictable. It's a predictable format. So, and then it automatically reads incoming support emails and routes them to the right department. So the inputs are the email text. For example, it might say, my invoice shows the wrong amount. And the other input is the historical data. So it might have 10, 20, 30,000 previously classified tickets. And then it has simple rules. So keywords mapped to the departments. So invoice, billings, broken, technical, sales, stuff like that. So the process then that you've defined to this agent is it scans the email for keywords, it analyzes the sentiment, and it checks past similar tickets. It assigns a category and a priority, and then it routes them to the correct team. So that's the input, that's the process, and then the output is the classification and the routing and the auto response. So it will say, because you said my invoice shows the wrong amount, and based on all the 10,000, 20,000 previously classified tickets and all the data that you've scored me on before that you've approved and that we've been through and I've learned from, I now know that that's a billing issue. This is high priority. So I'm going to route it through to the billing at company.com, and the auto response that we'll send to the person who sent the request is, we've received your billing inquiry and will respond in the next 2 hours or so. And so why this works really well, and that agent is continuously learning. So the more classified tickets it has, the more instances of different types of emails that it's going to get, the better it will get at being able to say, okay, well, this is the classification, here's the routing, and here's the response. Because sometimes it'll be 2 hours, sometimes it'll be 2 days, depending on the complexity of the ask. So it works really well because there's clear boundaries. There's a limited number of categories. So you'll have billing, you'll have technical, you'll have shipping, you'll have sales. That's quite a small amount, and that is something that can make sense to these tools. It's structured data, because emails follows predictable patterns. It's the success is defined because it either routes correctly or it doesn't. It's easy to measure it, and it's easy to score it and to train it. And there's no creativity needed. It's just pattern matching. And so it will just naturally improve over time. The more the tickets that come through, and the more that these agents, they learn because you give them basically thumbs up. You give them a Scooby snack, or you slap them on the wrists, and then they'll change the way that they do the thing moving forward. And then this one in particular is high volume, it's low complexity, so it's perfect for automation. Whereas when it comes to ABM, when it comes to any kind of content generation, even when you go one to few or one to many, there's no predictability between it. So you can't train an agent on how to actually write B2B content because it's always changing. And it's different for every client. And if you are trying to build an agent that's going to be doing ABM for you, then you're going to, you're not going to be very impressed with the results.
Yeah, it's really interesting that somebody that's kind of in AI so deeply is kind of has that slant, because I guess it's sort of you might expect that kind of. It seems like you've got quite measured, pragmatic kind of view on AI, like where it can be used well, where it maybe isn't so well suited. But like, where's I imagine I might be kind of jumping into something we're going to cover later on, but I just thought now's probably a good time to ask sort of where is the big opportunity to use AI in B2B marketing that you're seeing right now, or kind of in the next kind of 6-12 months?
Yeah. So honestly, from the clients that I've been, and also, it is worth noting, I think that you're right. I feel a lot of the time like I'm one of the more skeptical people about AI, which is crazy, because I'm the one who's like, no, that's not going to work. Don't bother investing in that. And that's because I come from the marketing world, and then I've come into AI. So when people say, oh, I want an agent that's going to do this thing, and I think, well, you're just going to waste 10 grand. Because you're not going to get a good result from that. The thing's not going to learn, and then you're not going to be happy with the results. And so you're going to just go back to doing it manually anyway. So the honest answer of where is the immediate value right now in AI is, how do you get your employees using AI as well as possible? Like I said, automating stuff is really challenging, because I'm not opposed to workflows that work really well to do specific things, and we can come on to that in a minute, because there's a distinction between workflows and the agents. But where I think real value is being missed is there's a great amount of tools out there that work really well in B2B marketing, but not many people know how to use them. And so the businesses that I'm working with at the moment, I'm training them on just how to get value out of these tools, how to actually use ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, Gemini, Gamma, Clay.com, really powerful one in B2B context. You don't need to overcomplicate things and just jump straight forward to the agent. When if actually you get your people using these tools really well and understanding how the data workflows work, how the systems work, therefore what to ask them, what questions what information and insights you should be giving them to get to a good outcome, but also how to split out the different requests and into a workflow. So quite often I see that people will write not the best structured prompt, expecting, like a full output out the other side of it. AI works best when it's given almost like a single or a couple of tasks and you're being really specific on it. So analyze this document is very, very different to, and then having a separate prompt that says, right now draft something that I can send through as an email, maybe based on the analysis of that document. If you merge those two things together in a single prompt, then you're not going to get as good results as splitting them out. Likewise, there's use cases for saying, start with Perplexity for this thing here, move into ChatGPT for this next thing here, and then move into Claude for this bit over here. A really good example would be if you're trying to create a synthetic persona. It's every marketer's dream that you could actually sit down with a CIO at the the retail business at John Lewis to be able to test your messaging and your concept on, but you never get that opportunity, and so it just typically hasn't happened. But if you decided that you're going to build a synthetic persona, it's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be an interesting thing to look at, and quite often you'll get really good, interesting results from it. So you can start with ChatGPT and say, this is kind of my understanding, this is the brief, this is the proposition, this is the account John Lewis that we're going after. What kind of questions do I need to be aware of that I can start building up a bit of knowledge to get information on how that CIO operates? Whatever it comes back with, that then is the answer to what you need to search for in Perplexity or in Gemini, or even a mix of the two. And then the output that you get from that, put it into Notebook LN to start synthesizing all of that data and insights into a brief that you can then put back into ChatGPT and give it a roll and say, you are a CIO at John Lewis. This is the character that you have. This is your strategic priorities. These are your challenges. These are your likely potential barriers that you're going to have. I'm then going to present you my messaging for this specific proposition here, and I want to just have a conversation with you about how this lands with you. That's ultimately how we can get really good results from using AI much quicker, is just by training your people, because then you get that the multiplier effect, where instead of one or two or a team of people who are building singular tools, you've actually got everyone at your business that's enabled on how to use these tools. And if that's driving 10-15% efficiency in terms of the administrative tasks and the repeatable workflows that they're doing now, and it actually unlocks this ability to go and do new ways of strategic marketing that we never would have thought possible before, that's a really, really great quick win.
Yeah, and I've that makes a lot of sense, and I've heard as well specifically that example of people finding it really useful to ask ChatGPT or one of the assistance tools, like please imagine you are customer persona, and then kind of like talking to them, learning about them, asking them questions about what they care about. Do you find, just getting into sort of something quite specific, do you find that creating custom GPTs or whatever the equivalent is in kind of other things outside of ChatGPT is a helpful thing to do? Because I know I've heard quite a lot of people talking to me about they've provided custom GPT with loads of information about like their, given it all their case studies, they've given it loads of, I don't know, just kind of their company specific information, and then they kind of will ask it questions. And is that something that you do or you help people with? Is it useful?
So there are definitely use cases for building custom GPTs. Yes, absolutely. And I think the case study example is a good one. But ultimately, this tech comes with limitations as well. So the way that ChatGPT will store that information is in what's called a vector database. And so how that works is it chunks data out into segments and then it embeds it into a very, very sort of small amount of data, into a very, very small amount of data, and then puts it into the database. And so when you're searching into a vector database compared to an SQL database, which is much more structured, it's looking for semantic terms. And so what that means is, in that use case there, you might say, we need to have a case study, a reference on platform consolidation or something like that. That can then look through what they've vectorized into that database, and it will pull out things that relate to platform consolidation. And so there are good use cases for that. So HR things as well, that's really good as a custom GPT. But when you want, but then when you want to have more structured data, so if you're looking for, because you don't want vectorized data if you're building like a personalized email, because what could happen there is that if you're trying to write an email for John Lewis, like we were talking about before, it might go into that vectorized data, look up something based on semantics, which is totally irrelevant to the account of John Lewis. And so in that
like
sense,
somebody called Lewis.
yeah, exactly that. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. So you can't always predict what's going to happen there. And so the better way of doing that one is you want it in a structured database where it can go in and it can say, right, we want John Lewis insights, and then it can pull out everything to do with John Lewis. But actually, so yeah, and these things have limits. There's limits to them as well. The context window of ChatGPT 4.0 is about 85,000 words, which sounds like a lot, but the closer you get to that 85,000 words, the more like the more diluted and the more confused the model's going to get, and therefore the worse the output. And so in these business workflows, if you are putting in, your entire case study database or your entire proposition database, even when you vectorizing it helps, because that then essentially sets it up as a RAG database. And so that's almost a separate workflow where it goes in and it searches and retrieves. But you have to structure that so well for it to understand what it's looking for it to actually add value into it. And so, yeah, if you think about all the business data that is actually out there that's existing, I can tell you it's probably a lot more than 85,000 words. I think last time I looked at it, even structured data alone at an enterprise is going to be something like 8.5 billion or 85 billion. I can't remember which. So it's a big ask in many of these things to be able to go in and just grab this information out. It's why data is so important. Data and insights are so important. And a lot of people, I think, have jumped to what agents can we build instead of actually thinking, well, maybe we structure our data and make sense of our data first and build that so that AI can understand it. My actual advice would be is I use projects a lot more in ChatGPT than I would custom GPTs.
Okay, I'm going to give away something embarrassing here, but I'm just looking actually on my screen on ChatGPT.
Yeah.
So I know I've created some custom GPTs. So I do see new project. What is a project?
So
like on ChatGPT?
Yeah. So a project is where you
is that new?
No, that Richard. Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't you worry.
How long has that been around?
About a year, I think.
Okay. Yeah. Because weirdly, I've never seen it.
A project is where you can cordon off data into its own its own use case. So this is really good for B2B marketing. If you're working on a client, let's say you're working on I don't know, I'm really bad at pulling out accounts out of a hat, but let's say you're working on CrowdStrike and you're doing a campaign that is specifically going out into the manufacturing sector. You can then pull out relevant documents, relevant materials, relevant insights, information that you have on that sector, and then put that into a project, because then that creates this vector database in its own isolated environment. And so then you can chat with the project and you can have as many chat histories as you want. And the more that you chat with it, the more you give it your ideas. And that's really important, because AI doesn't do this contextual thinking. It's got it doesn't understand the context in a way that a 5-year-old does, but it just understands pattern recognition to the point where it just comes across as a genius, but it doesn't get contextual thinking. But if you can give it those insights and you can give it that contextual thinking, then that you're feeding that into it. And so the more the data, and you don't, these models don't learn as you talk to them. They are static, but the data that they have access to is how it kind of is how it almost fakes that it's learning alongside with you. So if you're working on this project, you've done research, you've done messaging, you've done some creative concepts, you've got some go-to-market stuff in there, you've got some account insights in there as well. All of that is cordoned off in its own project. And so when you have a new request and you want to say, oh, I forgot about this thing from this meeting that we had, but I remember uploading it into GPT. Realistically, if you go in and start a new chat with that project, then it will be able to tell you, because it's developed so much data on that specific product that it becomes a really useful tool for you. And the reason I like doing this as well is when you use just a general chat and a general instance in ChatGPT, all of those are saved now. All of those are vectorized and so into a central database. And they can do that because the vector data embedding is so efficient in terms of how data is stored. It's much more efficient than even text data. And like I said before, 85,000 words of the GPT context window is 0.5 MB. So 85,000 words of embedded data is even smaller than that. It's absolutely tiny. So it then saves all of your chat history ever. And that's a cool thing, because try it after this. If you go in and you say, can you just critically assess me? What's my skill set? Where am I underperforming? What should I be really proud of myself about? It will come back to you, and because you use ChatGPT, it will probably have a really interesting understanding of you, and it will say, you're Richard and you've built Castler. You should be incredibly proud of the work that you've done so far. Honestly, give it a go. It's great. But
I have done it because I saw a prompt saying examine my kind of strengths and weaknesses.
That's right.
My areas for improvement and so on. And it was quite uncanny. I wondered whether it was a bit like a horoscope, almost like where if you read a horoscope or something, it always sounds like it's kind of like, oh yeah, that really resonates. But it was. Yeah, it had a couple of things that were on my mind as things that I need to improve on. So it was quite interesting. Cool. I would recommend it to people to do. Yeah.
And so that will prioritize the inbuilt memory. So you will have seen sometimes it will say memory saved. That's where it kind of develops this individual understanding of you as a person. And so that is its own memory database. And that one's prioritized over everything else because that's what it thinks, that's what it thinks you think you care about most. But then it looks through the rest of the chat history that you've had with everything. But the worry of having that chat history for everything is that then information can get mixed up between each other. As people at marketing agencies, you're working for many different clients, and you do not want the proposition for CrowdStrike to get mixed up with your proposition for McAfee if you're working with two cybersecurity businesses. So that's why projects is really powerful. And it's also why I'd say make sure that your chat in history and the memory that you have, you keep on top of that. And so make sure it's hygienic, make sure it's specific and it's relevant for you. Because sometimes it will just pull in something. I was looking through it the other day and it saved this memory thing that said, you're going on a motorhome holiday with your three mates and you want to know what shopping you should take. And I was like, well, I asked it that because I was just like, here's the recipes that we're going to do, and here's everything that I need to take as a list. But it saved that in the memory, and that's just not useful to me.
Yeah. So effectively, a project is almost like the best way of describing it is like an instance. Is that fair?
It's an enhanced instance, yeah.
So effectively, it's cordoning off your use of ChatGPT into it, so it will learn and remember everything, all the conversations and documents that are provided in that particular. Yeah, because that's not something I've been doing. I've just been I've got some custom GPTs that sort of do certain things.
Yeah.
And then I just use ChatGPT, the chats.
Remember,
certainly I've not I have no hygiene of the chats. I've not sort of deleted any of the chats really. So, but yeah, it's cool that it does remember that, and that's very good to know. I'm definitely that's gonna be one big learning for me is to start using those projects because makes sense. And can you share projects between different users?
No.
Okay.
No. So that is an issue of you can share, you can almost you can what's branching. So you can branch off a chat that you can send through to someone, but then you can't collaborate on things together. And so you can share a chat from that project, but you can't share the whole project.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. And just returning to agents, I know we discussed. So you said that agents need to be treated as bottom-up systems and processes, not top-down. Sorry.
Yeah.
Please expand.
Going back to one of the things I said earlier is if you go into something like ChatGPT, and I'm not saying that anyone does this anymore, by the way, but people were definitely doing this 2 or 3 years ago, and they were going in and saying, "I need you to write my full go-to-market for this new cohort, which I've identified in this account. Can you come back to me, please?" And then being somewhat disappointed with the results. And so that's what I mean by you can't look at it top down. You can't just ask it to do the entirety of a whole B2B marketing campaign, from right from the word go. So you and I, we've both worked in agency. We know how it works. When you have a project, you split it out into phases and milestones, and then within that you have tasks. So that would be like if that's your messaging phase, you would have tasks within there, and within your tasks you have steps as well. So over the course of a whole a marketing campaign, you might have 150 to 180 different steps that's happening across that needs to happen. You then that's what I mean. You want to use ChatGPT on the steps rather than the entirety of the task, and that's also where you can start to identify what are the things that we could automate in terms of the AI tools and the workflows and even the agents that we might be able to build. So a really good example of an automatable workflow is insights generation. And so if you can almost democratize the process that a research analyst would go through to get account insights on John Lewis, if you were looking at it through the cybersecurity lens of CrowdStrike, and you can say, well, this is what I'd start with. I'd look at the annual report. I'd then look through, I'd try and assess what's their challenges, their strategic initiatives, what's the account overview, what's their vision, what do they care about, what's their pillars, their success pillars. And if you're looking through cybersecurity lens, you might get a LinkedIn scraper as well, which is going through and seeing what roles are they hiring for, what roles do they have in place. You could even look through sort of more public databases around partnerships. If you're really good, you could plug it into third-party databases. Third-party databases. I mean, that would tell you that would say here are the partnerships of what's going on, and so that's then you've understood that workflow, and now you've got to build the system that can go and do that. And AI is really clever, but it's not clever enough to be able to take all of that information and go and do it itself, because you've got to set that up as a workflow. At the end of the day, it's a computer, and computers speak computers understand things very differently to how people do. A good example of that is if you were to explain to me how to go and make a cup of tea right now, you'd say stand up, go downstairs, go into the kitchen, put the kettle on, and it would be as simple as that. Whereas to a computer, you've got to say place right hand and left hand on desk, half a foot in front of you, push back one foot, turn right, step. Do you see what I mean? You've got to articulate the full workflow to it. And that requires a lot of stitching and API integrations. There's a bit more MCP, which is Anthropic's Model Context Protocol, which is coming in here. And then you've got to manage the data workflows as well. So AI speaks it understands things differently to humans. They're translating what we understand as words into numerical IDs, which is how LLMs manage and understand the predict. That's how they do the predictive side of what they're doing. They're predicting numbers. At the end of the day, they don't understand the words they're talking about. It's why they have a real challenge of being able to tell you how many letters are in a word, because unless they've been trained on how many letters are in that word, they don't actually really understand it.
Yeah. So effectively, it's a case of you want to break a process down into small chunks, or each individual step, and then you
Yes.
want to apply AI to help with one of those
Yeah.
steps rather than the entire thing. That's
Yeah.
like the
Yeah. Yeah.
basic recommendation. Where and it's about identifying the ones that have the kind of that sort of those characteristics that you kind of alluded to earlier around the customers, for example, that customer service like triage system,
Yeah.
perhaps something where there's quite a defined, like there's 8 categories and we need this to just be categorized in 8 ways and do
Yeah.
like one of these 3 things depending on which category it is. And yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
The automatable things, and there most of them in those 180 whatever steps that I mentioned have to be done by a human, but they can definitely be enhanced by humans using AI really intelligently and applying their knowledge and their experience, giving the tools the insights and the context that they need and the right direction and what the expected output is, and maybe even examples to say this is what good looks like. That's where you're going to get really, really good results from it, because you're imparting that knowledge into it, and AI just doesn't have that knowledge. It doesn't sort of, like I said, keep saying, it doesn't understand things. The best, if I just give an example of how I would describe sort of LLMs, is LLMs are trained on millions and millions of tokens of publicly available data. Maybe not always publicly available. Maybe sometimes it is somewhat illegally obtained. And now that you've probably seen all the legal battles that are happening at the moment, but they're trained on millions and millions of tokens, to the point where the last one where they've actually shared the amount of data that the model's been trained on would take a human 457,000 years to read that much data. And that's actually longer than modern humans as we know it has existed, which is about 300,000 years. And so that's mental, that they go through this and all of that information is just fed through it. And then there's a neural network in the LLMs where it's putting relevant what they call parameters into different sections, and so the parameters are the predictive model of what we see. So it kind of learns a little bit, but it's actually much better at the predictive element of being able to say, if this question is, if the statement is the girl poured herself a, then it will come up with a list of, well, here are the sort of 7 to 10 most likely words that's going to be. So you'll have coffee, water, tea, orange juice, milk, whatever, and then it will say, based on my training data, coffee would be 32% of the time in that. So the answer is going to be the girl poured herself a coffee. And that's how it works individually for each word going along. So and so it's the same as saying to a human, well, here's all of the data, you've got 457,000 years to go and read this. When that human comes out on the other side in this hypothetical example, and then you ask him and you say, or her, and you say, can you tell me what longshore drift is? They might, but they're not going to be able to say word for word what it actually is. It will depend how much it came up in the training data that they had, and whether that's a parameter or a piece of information that they've saved in there. So it would be able to give you a rough understanding, and the more it's read that thing, it would be able to give you a better understanding. But without the tool being plugged in, which is its ability to go and scrape from Google, which is a separate tool, then that's ultimately how these models work.
Yeah, super interesting. I'm learning a lot myself, I think, from this conversation. So yeah, and I know another thing you mentioned, which probably relates to the point about sort of the big opportunity, or one of the biggest opportunities, being enabling the staff effectively or B2B marketers to kind of use AI tools better. One of the things you've mentioned is it's important to get into the mindset of swapping in and out of different AI tools. So
Yeah.
could you expand a bit on that?
Yeah. So until about 3 weeks ago, I was a GPT diehard fan. That was the original tool that I remember using. I've used GPT for over 3 years now. I think I understand GPT. It makes a lot of sense to me, and I've got some really good outputs from it, and I've also got some really crap outputs. But that's okay. You've got to test. You've got to learn what's it good at, what's it not good at. The more you use it, the better you're going to get at it. Same as learning to play piano. But 3 weeks ago, I dived more into Claude, and I've used Claude before, and I've been pretty impressed by it. But I'm like, I like GPT. GPT gets the same thing. But lately I found that Claude is just getting unreal results. And so that is why I say get into this mindset of testing. We are in the absolute gold rush of AI at the moment. We're still in its infancy, really. If we think how long it took us to get from the brick phone to the smartphone, we're 3 years into this. Well, I think OpenAI formed in 2018. So, and AI has been around for a while. Alexa's been around for a long time. We've had the chatbots and models for a while as well. But LLMs, as we know it, really the last 3 years being in the market, they're only going to get better and better. And it's an absolute race at the moment. And sometimes you get new challenger people coming in, and then OpenAI or something brings out a new model. There's just this mindset that I think we all need to get into. The tools kind of operate quite similarly between them. I work with a lot of creative designers as well, and we're always saying, well, which is better? Is it Mid-Journey? Is it Stable Diffusion? Is ChatGPT a good option because it uses a different process to actually write to creating the images? So ChatGPT uses auto-regression, which is similar to how the text models work. So it does it pixel by pixel instead of character by character, or token by token is probably more accurate. And whereas for other image generation tools like Stable Diffusion, that is a reverse diffusion technology. So it's completely different. But that means that there's different use cases for why they should be useful. And it all depends on what they've been trained on and how the neural network works. So I would never just get wedded to using tools, and they're mostly free. So if you are someone who's an advocate of AI and you get 10, 15, 20 minutes, which really you should have been saving from using AI compared to where we were 3 years ago anyway, try out the free. They're all mostly free. So go and give it a try. Test it, see which ones work well, and don't be afraid to swap over if you do feel like you're getting better results from the other tool.
Yeah, it's interesting. And one of the things I've noticed with ChatGPT, which is the one I mainly use, I do sort of have the other ones bookmarked, but I tend to just, I guess, once you're kind of in one, you just tend to kind of, it's like a groove. So you just tend to use the same one. But something I've noticed is like the performance seems to fluctuate. So I felt as though before the last update, or one of the most recent updates, where they had that one that, I forget the name of the model, but where it used to cap you out. I don't know whether it was like 01 something or other. I don't know.
I think it was,
but like
5.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. I think it might have been 4.0 maybe.
Okay.
I don't know. But there was one that was really, really good. But I've got the Plus subscription, not the Pro subscription, I think. And it was like you could only use it a certain amount of times a month. But it was really, I remember it was really kind of impressively different and better. But now I don't have that. I mean, I'm just looking at the models I've got, and it's like 4.0, 03, 03 Pro, 04 Mini, and none of them are as good as that one I remember. And I also feel as though it seems to go through like periods of good form and bad form for me, where like it will be weirdly unreliable and it will actually regress, and then I don't know. Is that something? Am I like imagining that, or is that something that kind of is actually happening behind the scenes?
I mean, I would say that that's the 01 one that you had the really good thing with, and that's the more agentic one. And so that's the one that can break down what you've asked it into segments, and it can work through it bit by bit. 4.0 isn't as agentic. 4.0 is more optimized to be able to use the various tools that it has. And that's another thing we need to learn and be aware of is what are the different models and which ones should I be using? I think most people probably just go in and just use the standard one, but actually, depending on what you're doing, there's use cases for both. I'm not sure why you're getting performance issues because the model is the model. So it doesn't change. Every time you set up a new instance, that is just the baseline model. Nothing about that changes. It doesn't learn from what you're talking to it about. It just stores data on you. So, yeah, I'm not sure. I wouldn't know why it would have performance issues.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. No, well, it's an interesting thing to see what happens. And then we've probably covered some of this, but what does the future hold for AI-powered B2B marketing?
I have no idea. I'm going to be totally honest. I have absolutely no idea. I wish I knew. But I can give you, I guess, what I think is what I think could happen, because we don't know where the tech's going to go. Anything could be released tomorrow that could just totally change everything. And if they do crack AGI, I don't know what that means. I don't know what it would do. I kind of feel like everything's gone a bit quiet on AGI. It was a really big thing about a year ago, and then I think these businesses were like, well, people are more buying into agents, because agents feels like, oh, we can get we can swap people out and save money, or we can get the agents to do the boring task. And so they, like Sam Altman, just kind of moved away from this idea of AGI. I think they're still working on it in the background, but probably more for like robots, I would say. These tools, they are generic tool. They are, they're for the generalized audience. At the end of the day, they're not really built to be used for B2B marketers. You can get really good value out of using it as a B2B marketer, because they're really smart, but you've got to give it that insight, and you've got to give it that guidance and your personality for it to work really well. But AGI, I imagine they'd probably prioritize, well, how can we get everyone buying into this as much as possible? And B2B is quite a niche space, and so it won't be the priority. But in terms of what's going to happen with B2B, so my view is there isn't really a marketing funnel at the moment. And I know that's a really probably contentious thing to say, but it's more of a pinball machine. And that's an analogy I saw someone use on LinkedIn, and I just think it's the perfect analogy, because the funnel implies that it's predictable and that people just swoop down it, whereas the pinball, it's much more unpredictable. And the iceberg has grown as a result of AI, really, and it's been ever growing anyway with GDPR and all these other regulations. It's really difficult to track what people are doing, and so there is a level of unpredictability to it. But I think what businesses have been very guilty of doing is always moving towards, well, I want the thing that's predictable, because then I can prove my value to the CEO. And CMOs, CROs, salespeople, CMOs, they quite often, I'd say, undervalue the role that marketers play. And so marketers are sort of desperate to get the data that's showing, well, this is the ROI we've got, or this is the amount of impact that we're having in the market. And that's a really hard place to get out of, but I think the model's somewhat changing and buyer behaviors are changing. I read a stat, or I heard something from B2B Ignite that said 75% or so budget holders and decision makers at enterprise businesses are now 35 and under. And so what does that mean in terms of the sort of the generational expectations that me and you have, Richard? Is, I imagine that you're with me, where when you do get an email come into your inbox from someone that's just a cold email that means nothing to you, and it says, dear Jake, I noticed that you breathe oxygen. Would you like to talk about my cybersecurity platform? Like, it's just not that compelling. Obviously, there's a difference between that sort of, we've scraped your LinkedIn and we saw that you did this post and that's really impressive. Oh, by the way, this other thing. There's a big, when you have the contextual understanding, when you can say, hi, I've noticed that you've set up a small business. Cybersecurity is probably on your mind at the moment. Did you know this about this? This is something that we see with new businesses as a potential issue, and this is something that we do and we've done many times. That's much more interesting. And so where I'm going with this is buyer behaviors are changing. I would like to self-serve. I want proven over pioneering. I want to be able to go and do a lot of that research myself. And we now have these AI tools that can help you to do that. So using Perplexity, using Gemini, GPT, whatever you want to use, you can use these tools to basically build your shortlist and say, these are the challenges that I'm having. Can you help me to identify a shortlist based on all of the cybersecurity businesses or whatever? Which ones are going to be a good fit for me, and which ones have experience of working in the market that I operate in? That can then come back to you. It's why generative AI optimization, or generative engine optimization, as some people call it as well, which is kind of like the new sister or brother to SEO, is becoming so important. Because if 65% which when I last checked, people are using AI to do their Google searches now. It's so important that you're coming up in those different channels. And so that's one thing, is how can you make sure you're appearing so that you do get onto the shortlist? And then the other thing is, what do you actually do with those people once they are on that buying journey and they are at the point where they're interested to learn more about you? I think to some extent, I think it was a really interesting opportunity for some businesses to say, we noticed that you're, look, this is a challenge that you have or whatever. We've put together this agent for you, which is totally, built around our proposition, all of our resources, all of our case studies. We've got some custom value calculators in there as well, which you can tap into. Just if you're happy, answer these questions for us about you, and we're going to pull together a totally impartial response for you that's going to tell you a lot more about what our business does and why we might be a good fit for you. But there's no pressure or anything. We're an agent chatbot, and if at any point you do want to speak to a salesperson, you can speak to a salesperson. And then that would be a really interesting way to do things, to almost empower people to be able to go and do this stuff themselves without ramming a load of emails down their throats. I saw something the other day that said the amount of touch points to get to the point of a deal now has gone up again. So it's more like 25 to 30. And I kind of see it from a different perspective of, well, that means we need to do much more touch points, because that's just going to create more of this AI generic content that no one really wants to read, especially when it's not been actually put together very well. I think AI generated content absolutely has a place, but it can't just be automated, at least without a load of strategic planning and thinking and clever workflows to get that into place. And so I think the challenge, it shouldn't be, the number of touch points has gone up. I think the question should be, is maybe our touch points are just a bit shit. Maybe we should actually revisit the touch points that we're doing and make sure that they're actually meaningful and really high quality to get to get people onto our side and to get people to actually want to have a conversation with us. So I think I think those are kind of two big areas for B2B at the moment. It's how do we use, and that's not me saying that SDRs are out of the equation at all. SDRs absolutely still have that human role to play. And also in many instances, a lot of these people might not realize that they need the solution that you're offering. And so there is still that opportunity to be able to go and build that brand awareness, to build those perceptions. But I also think for the number of us who are sort of, we don't necessarily want to have a conversation straight off the bat with someone, is being able to empower the customers.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's I would agree that trend of the buyer journey being, I mean, people tend to want, I think when they're making a purchasing sort of, when they're buying things, I think they tend to want to avoid involvement with another human being as much as they can. I think it just seems like that's quite a natural, it's almost like unless you need to.
Yeah.
And then if you need to, it is then good to have somebody. But I think if I was looking ahead over the next, say, 5-10 years, I think the amount of purchases that are going to be made without a conversation or a meeting with a human being is going to go up a lot. And we're going to see more complex and expensive things being bought without any human interaction. I think that's kind of already a trend, but I think it's probably going to kind of increase.
That's really interesting, actually. I hadn't thought about it that way. I would say I think you're absolutely right for the more transactional things, where it's very clear of, this is product X, this is outcome Y, and this is the cost, and this is the ROI. I think that's much more simple. I think for more like strategic conversations and partnerships, definitely, and more maybe complicated or ambiguous product suites, which we see a lot in the work that we do. I do wonder if there'll always be an element of a human involved in that. But that's
I agree. It's not a case of like sort of they'll 100% always be ones that sort of do. It's more as a trend where, like, for instance, buying software. There's a lot of things where you're buying a software license now where it's like £2,000 a year, and you still got to speak to a salesperson. I think that kind of thing is like going to probably change quite rapidly. But even to the extent where, particularly around software, I'd say I would have thought even, 10, 20 times that amount of purchase, I think could quite easily be something where, because if you've got the ability for an agent to, as in a kind of a AI agent, to answer questions really in depth, and then you've also, there's just also like loads of material. I mean, a lot of it's not even AI. It's just like if you've got lots of just like really good kind of video demos and FAQ answers and stuff, and kind of the ability for people to demo the product, maybe have a kind of PLG motion as well. I think that all of those things kind of are sort of tending towards a reduction of kind of human involvement in the sales process. But I think, it's not to say that it's like, I think in a kind of counterintuitive way, perhaps it may make human beings more important where a computer can't do it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So where it's more, particularly B2B services. I mean, B2B services by their very nature of services like provided by people. I mean, maybe that's going to change, but that, anything that's like kind of service related is always going to need, in my view, you're going to want to meet the people that are going to provide the service, because there's an element of like chemistry and relationship there that's important. So I think it's different for services probably, and also for complex, very large scale kind of tech and other solutions.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree. It's why events are on the rise. I imagine we'll get more things like hackathons or just opportunities for people to get together, or more in-person meetings again. I think a big part of it is because I think people will want to see that the people that they're working with actually have the jobs, and that they're not just speaking to AI all the time. I want to have this chat with this guy because I want to actually test him where I know that he's not behind a computer, or that he is a computer, and that he can actually give me the answers that I'm looking for, and that I'm not just relying on the tech. It's this weird B2B dystopia that we're sort of discussing here, or just a global dystopia where you've just got AI agents talking to AI agents and just making these decisions together. I've already seen it more and more in LinkedIn, where I know that there are bots out there that can just add comments into stuff just to appear relevant. And I mean, as well, there are ones that you can use to just message people. I don't like those kind of tools. I think the whole purpose of those tools are somewhat to have a bit of a interesting conversation, or to be able to just share experiences with people. There's probably a use case for it somewhere, just to get the data, or to just give people and say, like, have a read through this, it might be of interest to you. I can see the value of doing it. But when you see it in comments as well, and you're just like, that's a bot, and that's just there so that you're present on other people's feeds, so that you're more relevant. It's awful. It's terrifying to me. I use tools to do my social posts for sure, because I'm a one person business, and I don't have 4 hours to write the post. That I have an hour or two, and so those tools are really helpful for me to be able to just shape my thinking. But it's all original thought. I don't go in and say, write me a post on this. It's like, I'm going to write this post. Here's the style that I want you to write it in. Here's my thoughts process. Here's everything. I actually talk to the tools. I very rarely type to them now. I just have my microphone on pretty much all day, almost like it's Jarvis, and I'm just chatting away. I'm just chatting away to AI all day, and it's because you talk 3 or 4 times quicker than you can type, and you get much more of your personality out into it, and that's where you can get actual sort of a really good output from these tools, because you've given it that information and you've given it a flavor of who you are. So it's an extension of you, rather than you having total reliance on the tool.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I probably need to talk more to AI, because I'm still typing. But I have tried it out. But that's another good thing I'll take away. But couple of quick fire bonus questions. Conscious we've probably gone a little over how long we were expecting to speak, but that's because it's been so many good things to cover. So if you could advise B2B businesses to do one thing in their marketing, what would it be?
Quality over quantity. Every day of the week, quality over quantity. At the moment, don't fall into this trap of just buying generic out of the box AI tools that's just going to help you with your reach. it's not going to get anywhere. We can all see through the AI tools that you're speaking to. Actually, I'm going to add a second one in here. I know you asked for one. Stop pretending that your AI is a human. If you're sending an email and it's just totally automated, I just think it's disingenuous to pretend that that's come from a person, especially when it's been really personalized. Or like, obviously we're all used to automated emails, newsletters, articles, stuff like that. That's absolutely fine. But I do also think it's fine to say I used AI to help me to write this, or we did this here. It's just, let's bring the human back into it. I had a call from someone a few weeks ago. I had a chat with him for about 5 minutes. I thought, oh, this is actually quite interesting. I'm going to sit around for this. And then I got modelled up on something that he'd asked me, and I asked him to ask the question again. And then he asked it in exactly the same way, in exactly the same tone. And then I asked him again, and he did it all over again. And I realised it was an AI. It was just a really convincing, stuff like Australian sounding AI on the phone. I felt duped, and so I hung up. And if they'd introduced that call and said, I'm an AI agent and I've been instructed to give you a call because you're the sales manager has identified you as a person of interest. Here's the things that I can do for you. And here's, let me just ask you a bunch of questions and we'll see if we're a good fit. That's fine. I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
But don't fake that your AI is a person.
Yeah. I definitely agree with that. And finally, looking forward to this one. What's your most contrarian take when it comes to B2B marketing?
I've said this one already. I think the idea of it's more touch points to get people to convert. I just think that's totally the wrong way of looking at it. I just think that we've got bollocks touch points, if I'm honest. I get it that it's complicated. I get that touch points is quite an ambiguous thing in many areas to measure because of just the complexity of measurement at the moment. And I think focus on actual outcomes and get sales and marketing alignment between what your KPIs and metrics are. Stop looking at vanity metrics. No one cares about your click. It's interesting. It's important stuff to have, but I think you should be prioritizing, revenue and pipeline and MQL to SQL conversion and things like that over click-through rates and intent data analytics. I'm probably going to get trouble. I'm going to get a lot of hate for that one.
No, I think so. Just to be clear on, I guess what it is, it's a case of saying we should be trying to get less touch points, but more kind of quality, meaningful touch points, rather than saying, customers, buyers it's taking ever more touch points in order for them to make a purchase. So we need to do more stuff. It's instead taking the opposite view of actually that's because they're not maybe finding what they need in the first kind of 2-3 touch points. And so that's why they need all 25.
Yeah.
So
I don't think we should be celebrating, we hit 5 touch points because we sent this guy 5 automated emails. I think it should be more, we got a really good response from this person here because we sent them one email where we really nailed it on the head in terms of what his challenge is and what our unique offering is and how that can actually support him. I think that's a much better place to come from with this. You can use AI to help you to get to those outcomes, by the way. That's absolutely fine. There's no issue with doing that, and it will drive for success. But it's just moving away from this idea of let's just automate as much as we can, where actually it's just going to kind of be generic output, and let's focus on quality interactions that are actually meaningful.
Yeah, it really resonates, and I think I agree. I think in terms of definitely like that idea of one of the things that we are talking about quite a lot with clients at the moment is better to do a lower volume of sort of real differentiated content than a high volume of lower sort of, because there's so much of that now that it's better to think of doing, say, 1 or 2 really sort of unique bits of content that has proprietary data and a real kind of unique viewpoint that's based on your own specific context as either an individual or a company or whatever it might be, versus like, well, now we can, write 10 blogs in an hour using AI. Like, let's do that. It's kind of like, well, okay, but what does that achieve? Like, yeah. So yeah, agreed. And I think it's been really interesting, just I guess hearing somebody that's so involved in AI have such a kind of pragmatic and kind of non-sensationalist view. I think that's what's come across. And also so somebody that's kind of actually, yeah, very measured about kind of where it can be used, where it can't be, recognizing its sort of huge potential, and not just potential, but it's what it can do today to make, to increase productivity, efficiency by 10-15%, for example, but also not kind of getting carried away and saying like, fire your team, get a few agents, tell them that you need to like increase revenue. I think one of the things that I have said is like, I think I've mentioned this at an event that we hosted a few months ago, that you still can't ask AI to just be like, I just want a new customer. Like, it just doesn't work in that way. But I think like, and I'm not sure it ever will, because I think that sort of, well, in fact, I would really strongly doubt it will, because of the fact that if ever there was that kind of button, everyone would just be pushing it all the time. So then it would stop working, because you know what I mean? So it's like, I think being in marketing is always going to be, you're always needing to sort of do the thing that's different to what other people are doing. And so that means that you're always going to need your own individuality as a business and as people in order to kind of be successful. And so that kind of idea of AI being an enabler and a kind of supercharger of like individual actors rather and people, rather than other than perhaps those kind of fairly narrow, like specific steps in a process that are quite kind of tightly defined. But sort of beyond those, it's actually more of a kind of, it's more of an enabler for people rather than a kind of replacement for people, which I know isn't a kind of, that's not a hugely sort of, that's probably quite a classic like view on AI. But that seems to be, if I sort of summed up like your take, your what, like in a fair way.
Yeah, that's a really good summary, and thank you. You know what? Actually, I'm going to change one of my answers from before of what is the most important thing for marketing to look at the moment, and this is coming from like the sort of the AI evangelist, the guy who really buys into AI. I would, and I said this before on the call, work out your data before you start with agents. That would be my ultimate guidance, is actually look at your data and make sense of your data for how that impacts marketing. And if you can make sense of your data and you can build it in the way that AI can then understand it, that's where your agents will get really good outcomes.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, that's really great. And if people want to keep in touch with you, what's the best way for people to do that?
Have a look on my website, which is jimarketing.ai, and then you can find everything that you need to know about me, rather.
Yeah. Great. Okay. Well, yeah, that was super helpful. I've learned a lot, certainly. I'm slightly embarrassed by my lack of prior knowledge of the project function of ChatGPT. But you do learn something new every day. So, yeah.
Not many people are aware of it, mate. So
no, yeah. It's just like been sat there. It's like weird. I'm like, yeah. But anyway, yeah. Thanks for coming on, and speak soon.
Thank you so much, Richard.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.